Hey guys, I'm Naguura, and today we're going to be talking about the PTR of 9.1 that has been going live. So that means we saw the initial changes that Blizzard has applied to the server, which means there's class changes and other stuff. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what those changes are going to be. Quick disclaimer before we go into this, try to not doomsay any of these initial changes, because this is just PTR, right? This means these changes can still be adjusted by Blizzard. All the class changes, this is just something that we can initially test. If stuff is like too much of a nerf or too much of a change or something doesn't work out, then Blizzard still has the possibility of adjusting it. So definitely don't react to this incredibly badly. Don't be like, oh my god, my class is dead, I'm gonna reroll, I'm deleting my character or whatever. Like, make sure we're looking at this objectively. Things that are actually bad, we can give constructive criticism for, and maybe they're actually going to be changing it, as long as we're not being overly negative about like everything they do. First of all, we look at the class changes. I'm not going to go into much detail about any other class than Moonkin. I don't play other classes too much. And on top of that, none of these changes are final, and this video would be taking way too long if I go into a lot of details for every single class. People watch me for my Moonkin knowledge, so I'm going to go into a little bit more detail for the Moonkin changes, and the rest of the changes I'm just going to quickly go over. I will do a more in-depth class change video once we have the final version of 9.1. I will give you an overview of classes and specs that got buffed and stuff that got nerfed, but for now we're just going over the changes because none of this is final, so there's no reason to talk about nerfs and buffs and how much things got nerfed, because again, things are obviously still changing before this goes live. So the initial changes for Moonkin is that Moonkin is getting nerfed. I don't think this is a big surprise to anyone. Moonkin has been performing incredibly well. So let's see how we got nerfed. All right, so first of all, New Moon actually did get buffed from a 25 seconds to a 20 seconds recharge timer. Now, unfortunately, fortunately rather, I personally don't like New Moon. I know a lot of people disagree here. I personally don't want to play this talent. For me, it's fortunate. For other people, maybe not so much. This talent is still not going to be our best talent, so we're still not going to play this. Now it's a little bit closer to the other talents, so if you want to play it, you can without feeling bad. Okay? Then Solstice got nerfed. Solstice is in the same row as New Moon, which means I got adjusted even more. This means that Solstice is actually not our go-to talent anymore from the initial sims that we've seen. The Moonkin theory crafters have done some initial sims. None of this is final, it's just the initial calculations that have been done. And these two changes make Fury of Elune our go-to talent in the last row for like almost every situation. Okay, so this is what happens with those two changes. Then I'm going to skip over this for a second. We're going to the last change, and that's the balance of all things nerf. So our best in slot legendary is getting nerfed from 40% crit when you enter Eclipse to 24% crit only, but it decreases slower. So 3% crit lost every second instead of 8% crit lost. This is a pretty big nerf to the legendary, considering that a big reason why the legendary was so good, because it buffs our convoke damage a lot. So we use our cooldowns and we use convoke, and our spells have 40 or 80% crit that are being shot out by the convoke, right? So with this nerf, we're going to do quite a bit less damage with our convoke, and which is obviously going to overall nerf our damage quite a lot. One more thing I'm gonna mention, which is not here in the Druid changes, actually further down. So the Imperial Ordnance trinket now puts other unused trinkets on a 40 seconds cooldown when used, instead of a 20 seconds cooldown. So this basically eliminates our double unused trinket that we have been using. We had the trinket combination of Imperial Ordnance plus Quantum Device or Divine Bell, which really boosted our damage, especially our cooldowns with Convoke, even further. And it was a pretty big damage increase to play with this trinket. With the nerf coming in, this also nerfs our single target damage, since we're not playing with this anymore. All in all, this is going to be approximately a 7% damage nerf for us on single target. But again, I don't think we should be doomsaying any of these changes, because I think these changes are actually good. Because the Imperial Ordnance trinket if we would have been stuck playing this trinket for the whole expansion and constantly laying our cooldowns for 20 seconds to line it up perfectly, I think that would have been a bad playstyle. So I like the fact that they're changing this so we don't have to play with this double unused setup anymore. I think it was getting a little bit tiresome eventually. And then I also think it's okay that they nerf Balance of All Things, because that legendary was quite a bit of an outlier for our legendaries. Like, it was quite a bit better than all of our other legendaries, which created this situation where we just play this legendary everywhere. There were some situations where people played like Dreambinder in PvP, and sometimes people tried to use Pulsar in M+, but in the end it was always both that is just too good in all situations. So I think this is a justified nerf, for sure. Even though it does nerf our single target by 7%, I think they can still aura buff us if this is too big of a nerf. We will have to see, right? We're going to be doing PTR testing, raid boss testing, and we will see the damage of the classes. And if Moonkin somehow really ends up being like bottom tier or whatever because of these nerfs, then Blizzard can always give us an aura buff. Right? They can always say, you know, all of our abilities do 2% more damage, 3% more damage, whatever it may be. I think it's better for them to nerf this, to not have these like weird outliers, than to, you know, be too afraid about getting overall nerfed. Because in the end, Blizzard can always adjust the damage with aura buffs. But let's go to the one last change or nerf that is much more concerning than everything else, is this here. Stellar Drift has been redesigned. Starfall damage increased by 25% and allows you to cast while moving while Starfall is active, but it has a 15-second cooldown now. This 15-second cooldown is on Starfall. A lot of people are not understanding this properly. They think that the talent itself is on a 15-second cooldown, like the cast while moving, but that's not true. It's the Starfall that is on a 15-second cooldown if you have this talent. Because Starfall does not have a cooldown right now. It doesn't stack, so it's theoretically on like a 8 to 10 second cooldown, because what's the point of reapplying it, right? If it's already up and it's just gonna be overwritten. But this gives it a 15-second cooldown, and without the 2 seconds extra that we usually would be getting from the Stellar Drift, the Starfall only lasts 8 seconds. So this means that if we use this talent, our Starfall is gonna have a downtime of 7 seconds. Because you cast Starfall, it's up for 8 seconds, 7 seconds downtime because it's in a 15-second cooldown, and then you cast again. So in almost all scenarios, this is going to be a damage loss to take this over not taking a talent at all. So you would rather not use a talent than use this. It's actually going to be an overall damage loss because of the downtime of Starfall that is going to be happening if you use this. There's like very, very niche situations where it would probably not be a damage loss. For example, if there's ads that spawn every 15 seconds and they're only alive for 8 seconds, then the downtime doesn't really matter. But that's like an incredibly specific situation that is probably never really gonna happen, right? This is definitely a bad change that should be reverted in my opinion, because having a talent that is a loss in damage for taking it should just not exist in the first place. I don't think there should ever be a talent that will cost you damage for using it. Talents should always be a damage increase. Even if one talent is a little bit worse than the other, none of the talents should be an actual damage loss over not taking a talent at all, right? So I hope you agree with me on this one. I think it's a bad change. And a lot of people are going to be like, oh, but Moonkin needs to be nerfed and it's justified or whatever. And listen, I agree that Moonkin has been strong, but this is just a wrong change. If they want to nerf Starfall or they want to nerf our casting while moving, sure, they can do that, but not like this. This is definitely just the wrong way. In the end, we are just going to play Twin Moons, like the other talent in the same row. So it's not going to be like the end of the world, but why completely destroy a talent? Might as well delete it at this point, right? Might as well just completely delete it and only have 2 talents in this row. Also, I do have to say that a lot of Moonkin players really, really enjoy the casting while moving in an AoE situation. So it feels like this is just diminishing our fun. And that's always something that I hate to see. Like, you hate to see the fun of a class being destroyed. It's one thing to do like slightly, like to nerf their damage slightly. That's one thing, right? But nerfing the playstyle in like from fun to unfun is a different kind of story, right? So I definitely don't think that completely removing the casting while moving for Moonkins is the play, especially because I don't think it's that good for Moonkins to be able to cast while moving in an AoE situation. Because of course on single target we don't cast Starfall, so we can't cast while moving on single target. And in an AoE situation, I think the more targets there are, the more globals we cast because we need to apply our dots. So we don't benefit that much, like we're not doing that much more damage from being able to cast while moving on AoE because we're using so many globals to apply dots that we are incredibly mobile anyway. So even if we don't go with this talent, even if we go with Twin Moons, we're still going to be very mobile as casters, as Moonkins on AoE. So I don't think this has to be removed because I just don't think it's that good. But of course, if they want to nerf it, then they should, just not this way. Anyway, I got stuck on this a little bit too long, I'm sorry, but we're moving on now. So those are the Moonkin changes, which I went into a little bit more detail with, but now we're gonna just quickly go over the rest of the changes. So Mage, Fire Mage has been nerfed quite a lot. We see Flame Strike damage reduced, Flame Patch damage reduced, Kindling reduces your cooldown of combustion less than before, and the Conduit Infernal Cascade has been nerfed as well, so huge fire nerfs. I quickly just want to say that I do think fire did actually need a nerf, but this might be the wrong way because I don't know enough about Fire Mage to judge everything about Fire Mage, but the way it seems to me is that Fire Mage is incredibly good in that niche that they have, like this uncapped AoE, right? Whenever there's uncapped AoE, like whenever there's like 10 or more targets and they can combust it, that's when they're like doing this insane like damage, right? This is what makes them so good. But as soon as you don't play around this uncapped AoE, you know, like if you pull 2 mobs and then there's 3 and then there's 4 and then you pull 2 again, like if you don't play around their combustion and around their uncapped AoE, then they're not actually that great, right? I mean, they're good, but not that great, right? So to me, it almost seems like that they needed more of a like rework of their abilities, like nerf what they're really good at and not nerf like everything that they do. That's my opinion, at least. We'll see what the other Fire Mages are saying and how they're testing it on the PTR. Of course, none of this is final, so they can still adjust or revert some of these changes. We'll see. Then, Priest. We see Disc Priest Spiritual now as a 90-second cooldown instead of 60 seconds, so a Spiritual nerf. I personally think that Spiritual kind of needs a different nerf and not a cooldown increase because it's really strong. And just making it a little bit of a higher cooldown doesn't mean it's less strong. It's just you're just able to cast it less frequently, which of course is a nerf, but it doesn't make it less strong. And you could just say, oh, let's just bring another priest now, you know? Like instead of playing 2, we're just going to play a 3rd or something, you know what I mean? But yeah, we'll see how this change actually applies to the raid. It also heavily depends on the raid encounters that we're going to be seeing in the new raid, right? So we're going to have to see on the raid testing how this is going to be affecting the priests and the healers in general. Then for Holy, we have a very interesting change to Symbol of Hope. Bolster the morale of a party or raid members within 40 yards. They each recover 60 seconds of cooldown on a major defensive ability, and they regain 12% of their missing mana. So this is a very interesting ability. This means that this does not affect immunities as far as I know, but it affects defensive abilities, yeah? So like Bark Skin, Survival Instincts, Shield Wall, these kind of things it probably affects. I personally have a little bit of a fear that this might create some situations on boss fights where you might be cheesing an ability. Like, I'm going to give you a dumb example, but imagine you're doing something like Sludge Fist, and you would actually survive to break the chains with your partner with your defensive cooldown, okay? But that's not a viable strategy because the chains get applied too often for you to have the defensive cooldown ready. But with this Holy ability, you could theoretically reduce the cooldown and then you just always break the chains immediately as soon as they get applied. You just use your defensive, break the chain, all of the chains on the whole raid. You just play the fight without the chains. Now, this would obviously make the fight a lot easier. Like, if you could always break those chains, that would really trivialize the fight, because then you just move around however you feel like and you do whatever you feel like, right? This ability basically enables these kind of strategies. It is very niche, you know, like it's possible that you cannot abuse anything, but it also is possible that there might be a mechanic that you actually can ignore with having like multiple priests to reduce your cooldown. So we'll see how this works. I do just fear a little bit that it might create a cheese situation, which then would make it mandatory to bring X amount of holy priests, because then the whole boss fight is like 10 times easier. But yeah, we'll see. Then Shadow Priest got a very small nerf with the conduit. That got changed. So it's like a slap on the wrist, basically, which we'll see what else they got, because I do think that Shadow Priests are going to be really strong next raid. Then Rogue. The shield from Cloaked in Shadows is now 50% larger, lasts for 4 seconds, and no longer decays while the Rogue is out of stealth. So this is mainly a PvP change, because Rogues were able to vanish, even though they had dots on them. And then they would not break out of stealth because the shield absorbed the dot damage, basically. So this is in regards to that. The shield is larger, but it only lasts 4 seconds. You're not going to be broken out of stealth for the first 4 seconds if you have this conduit. But then after the 4 seconds, the shield is gone and the dots are actually damaging you. So I think this is a really good change, because it made some PvP situations really weird. Then, Warlock changes. We see Dark Pact being buffed, which is, I would say, interesting, because I thought Dark Pact was already really strong. So interesting to see this change, at least for PvE. We'll see how this affects Warlocks. Then Chaos Bolt damage buffed, 10% Chaos Bolt damage. Affliction Rupture nerfed, 80% nerf. Agony damage increased. And Shadow Embrace now lasts 16 seconds, up from 12. And can now only be applied to one target at a time. Shadow Embrace has been something that people complain about for Warlocks a lot. Not sure if this is the correct way of fixing it, because the way Affliction Warlocks like to play is they like to snipe low HP targets to get a shard, right? But this change means that if you have a main target and you're trying to snipe a low HP target, if you time the drain wrong, if you start draining the low target too early, it will tick 1 damage on that target, and it will apply the Shadowy Embrace to your target that you're trying to snipe, and it will remove your stacks from your main target, because you can only have it up on one target at a time. So it's still possible to snipe targets and get shards without losing your Shadowy Embrace if you time it perfectly, but it's going to be much more difficult, and it's like, yeah, the Warlocks are going to talk more about this, but yeah, we'll see how this actually affects them. Then Focus Milling Conduit effectiveness reduced by 53%. And the Legendary has also been changed or redesigned. Corruption damage is increased by 25%. And each time Corruption deals damage, it extends the duration of all your curses active on the target by 2 seconds. Alright, so this is also, I think, a PvP nerf, because this is basically the talent, the legendary that every Warlock played in PvP to slow every player's movement speed, which was incredibly annoying in lots of situations. So I think this change is pretty welcome for most players, even for Warlocks, I think, because that slow just made everyone hate Warlocks. Everyone's like, oh my god, an Affliction, I'm just going to be slowed all game again. It's like, it was annoying in RBGs and in arenas. So I think this is a good... I'm not sure how good this Legendary now is, though. Like, this seems pretty... I feel like it seems pretty useless to have the curses extended, but I don't know, we'll see. Then, Covenants. We do have new Covenant campaign chapters now, because the renown levels are going to be going to 80. So we have 14 new renown levels. Then Soulbinds have more rows. This is what it looks like. I'm not going to go into detail for each single Soulbind ability that got added, but it definitely makes the choice a little bit more interesting now. Like, it's possible that maybe you play a different Soulbind now, or maybe you play a different Covenant even, because of those Soulbind abilities that got added. Of course, keep in mind, again, none of this is final, so if something is incredibly OP compared to something else, it's very likely that they might even change it or adjust it, so keep that in mind. Then we also have basically changes of abilities of existing Soulbind abilities. There have been quite a lot, so I'm not going to go all over those changes, but that's definitely something that they're going to keep an eye on. They're definitely changing the Soulbinds around a little, which is nice to see. Then, of course, we have the new raid, the Sanctum of Domination. There's already going to be raid testing on Friday, on April 16th. and there's a total of 10 bosses in the raid. I think 10 is definitely a good amount of bosses. I think it's like the perfect amount. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the raid, of course. Then we already talked about the Imperial Ordnance change. Then there's a bunch of PvP changes. I'm not really going to go over all of these changes because I personally do play a little bit of PvP, but I don't know enough about the classes to even have an opinion on these. But one thing that is cool to see is that they're actually changing the PvP talents. So you can see a lot of these changes are PvP talent changes, and they added new talents, some of them for some classes. So that's actually really, really interesting. And some PvP talents have been completely removed. So yeah, definitely something that is really interesting to look over if you're a PvP player, and if you're interested in these kind of changes, you can check them out. I will be linking all of these links in the description below, so you can click on them and look over everything. Then we have the mod changes here. So there's basically a new zone that has been unlocked, Korthia. There's actually also a flight master where you can fly from Verbenarius to Korthia. And then there's also a bunch of other things like Maw Assaults and Tormentors of Torghast that have been added to the Maw. I haven't personally looked at this yet. There's like an introduction quest, and then you will get it unlocked. I'm going to take a look at it, and then I will give you my opinion on it. But it's good to see like new content in the Maw. Even though a lot of people don't like playing the Maw, I still think it's good to have at least new content, because we're probably going to have to farm the Maw again once the new patch comes out to farm our sockets. Which is going to have a new currency, or like, yeah, a new currency, right? But we're probably going to be getting it from the Maw, I would assume. So it's good that we have new content. All right, then moving on to the next few changes. We have new Covenant legendaries. It's basically only a few legendaries that are known, but it's Covenant legendaries for each spec. Of course, that means it might change what Covenant you play, because if one Covenant legendary is like really good for you, then this might make that Covenant better for your class. So this is definitely interesting. I think it's cool to see these kind of legendaries added. But yeah, we're going to have to test them and see how it works, how they balance everything. So far, we only know the Druid legendaries, the Mage legendaries, Warrior, and DK. Yeah, and DK. So those are the legendaries we know. I'm not going to go over all the legendaries because, again, it would just take too long. I'm quickly going to go over the Moonkin ones. We only really know the Necrolord, the Venthyr one, and a little bit of the Night Fae one. So the Necrolord makes Adaptive Swarm have a higher chance to split into 2 swarms when they jump. And the Venthyr one, each time Ravenous Frenzy is applied to its duration, it's increased by 0.2 seconds. So these legendaries don't make those Covenants better for us. So that means if you play if you play the best Covenant, it's kind of irrelevant to us, these legendaries, because we are not going to be playing Venthyr or Necrolord, unless maybe for M+, because the changes to Moonkin, especially that Stellar Drift change and the boat change, might make it a possibility that we play a different Covenant for M+, and then those legendaries might be interesting again. But until then, once we have more information, I'm going to be talking more about that. For now, I'm not going to be speculating. And then for Night Fae, there might be legendary that is Convoke the Spirits cooldown is reduced by 1 minute, and will use an exceptionally spell more often, which is Full Moon for Moonkins. The number of spells cast by Convoke are halved, and occur over half the duration. So it's going to be a 2 seconds channel, and it's going to be half the abilities, okay? So 8 abilities instead of 16, and the chance of it casting Full Moon is going to be higher. So this might be an interesting legendary. We don't know exactly how this works yet because it's not live on the PTR, so we cannot test it. Depends on how good it interacts with Nia, with like Growth Invigoration, how many Full Moons it actually casts. And yeah, we're gonna have to see how this exactly works before we can judge it, but it might be an interesting legendary for a Night Fae Moonkin. Then there's a very interesting reference that got data mined, and it's possible that we're going to be getting bonus rolls back, bonus coins. I think I'm okay with it, but I'm not like I don't need coins to be a thing, but I also wouldn't hate that they exist. I'm not sure on my opinion on this one. We're gonna have to see. I don't think I care too much. I think it is nice. Like if you need only one specific item from a raid, and you have like one additional chance to get it, I think it definitely like makes it a little bit better. For example, I've been wanting to get a certain item in Castle Nathria forever, and it just doesn't drop, right? And I don't have any additional ways of trying to get this item except killing the boss every week. And getting lucky in the weekly vault, of course. Maybe having an additional chance would make it less annoying for people that want specific items. So this PvP change, It's very interesting. We don't know 100% yet what this is going to be, but basically what Wowhead is thinking is that there might be PvP items that have increased item level if you're engaged in PvP combat. So what this means is that you have an item that is, let's say, item level 200, but if you're engaged in PvP, it turns into 213 item level. I personally think that this is an incredibly good change because the way the PvP system works at the moment, I feel like both the PvE players and the PvP players dislike the PvP vendor right now. Because for PvP, it creates the issue that it takes you so long to upgrade all of your items that it's really hard to gear your ults. It takes like a really time because you have to farm so much honor, and then when you play arena, you're facing these like really high item level geared players, and you just can't compete with them because you have like the initial gear. So it creates this really big gear discrepancy in PvP right now, which makes people hate playing alts, and it's just creating this whole problem in PvP. And the other thing with the current system is that PvE players are gaining a pretty huge advantage for getting high rating in PvP to be able to upgrade the PvP items, because versatility is not a bad stat for a lot of people in PvE. So having the high item level PvP items is a huge advantage for a lot of players. And that's why a lot of players felt obligated to get the high rating to be able to get those items, myself included. And this created a bunch of problems. It created problems with boosting. Too many people have been getting boosted, so the whole ladder is filled with like people being boosted. Boosting, of course, is allowed if it's for gold, but if the incentive for getting boosted is so like big, if you're getting such a big advantage for getting boosted like one time to a certain rating and then just staying on that rating for the whole season, it just creates this problem that so many people want to get boosted and feel like it's worth it to spend that gold to get those items because it's such a big advantage that it just created all of these issues, right? So what this change actually does is that the gear is going to be lower item level for PvE. That means this is not going to be beneficial anymore for PvE players to want to get. Like, you're not going to be able to get much use of this gear in PvE because it's 13 item levels lower. So that fixes the issue of the PvE players feeling the need to get high rating in PvP without actually wanting to do it. Of course, this is not going to change anything for people who actually like PvPing. Like, if you really like to play PvP, then this is not really changing anything for you for PvP. But for a PvE player who doesn't want to play PvP, you're now not feeling forced to do it anymore. Of course, this is creating a problem for PvP players a little, as in their gear is not going to be so strong in PvE anymore. Because if you're like a high-rated PvP player, the highest item level that you can obtain for PvE is now going to be lower because it doesn't scale 13 item levels higher in PvE. So it's going to be a little bit of a downside for PvP players when they play PvE. So you're going to need different gear sets now, or you're just like accepting the fact that you're like 13 item levels lower in PvE. So yeah, that's a little bit of a downside for the players, but so far, I think people that I've seen talk about this, the PvP players that I've heard talk about this, think that it's a positive change because of the fact that it eliminates the discrepancy between the gear, between their ults and like their mains, because you don't need to do this endless honor grind anymore, and you're not going to have like this huge item level difference between your ult and your mains, where you're just going to be completely destroyed in arena until you farmed like 1 million honor and upgraded your gear. So I do think that most PvP players actually are looking forward to this change, and I hope this fixes this whole PvP gearing issue that we have been having in the first season of Shadowlands so far, which made a lot of PvP players not wanting to play anymore. There have been barely any teams that queued up, and all the PvE players feel the need to play PvP and all that stuff. Like, it definitely created a bunch of issues. So I hope this actually is going to be fixing that. I think this is a good change, but yeah, we're going to have to see. Then, moving on to the last information that is actually very exciting. There's going to be an in-game system that is basically a Mythic Plus scoring system. Blizzard has announced that they are going to be implementing a system similar to Radar.io, in Chains of Domination 9.1. We don't have any details about this. We just know that there's going to be a scoring system, but we don't know exactly how it's going to work. But I think this is an exciting thing. I know that a lot of people have negative thoughts about Radar.io in general because they think it creates a toxic environment where people don't get invited because they don't have a score. People leave keys because the key's not getting timed, or they think it's not getting timed. People only inviting certain classes that they think are good for that level, and so on. People definitely think that this is creating a lot of problems. But I personally think that this change doesn't make the problem worse, right? Because we already have Radar.io, right? We already have it. It's there. So if they implement it into the game, it's at least not a third-party program that you're looking at. It's at least in the game. I do agree with a lot of people that think that there's problems with the way Mythic Plus works right now, and specifically like how pugging works. Actually, I already made a whole video on this problem that you can check out on my channel if you want to have my opinion about this. The truth is that the existing of Radar.io created a whole new scene in World of Warcraft, the High and Plus community. And the High and Plus community, if you're not part of it, you might dislike it. Maybe you don't like the fact that it exists, but it does exist. And completely removing a scoring system or whatever would really hurt those kind of players, because if the scoring system would be completely removed, if Radar.io gets removed and there's no in-game system, then it will just completely destroy the High and Plus scene. No one's going to be pushing keys anymore. It's just the way it is. If there's no ranking system, then no one's going to be playing. And that would completely ruin the scene, which some of you might actually look forward to, but it's just not the solution. There must be a different way of fixing this, but still have those players that like to do high keys to have a scoring system, Because why ruin this whole scene for a problem that might be able to be fixed otherwise, right? There should be other solutions that we should be looking at first before we want Radar.io to be removed, right? It's like saying you want world rankings from raiding removed because you're not getting invited to a guild. It's like saying there shouldn't be a world first race anymore because you don't get invited to a Mythic guild. It's very similar. People like these ranking systems. People are competitive and they want to go for these high keys. And the same as there's guilds who go for a world first kill in the raid, and same as people go for high rating in PvP. These systems encourage people to push as high as they can, which of course in some form can affect the community in an unhealthy way. But at the same time, it also creates this whole new player base that is really playing the game for this reason only. This is their joy, and this is the reason they play the game, right? So I don't think completely destroying this scene is the solution for the problems that some of the community members have been seeing. There's other solutions that we can look into first, for example, stuff like solo queue, right? If there's a queuing system for Mythic Plus, then the queuing system doesn't care about the class you play. Maybe that is a solution to the problem that isn't completely destroying the high scene. It's very possible that you say, you know what, you can queue up for plus 15 keys for your weeklies, or your plus 14 keys or whatever. So you just queue up, you pick your role, and it just invites you and it puts you together to a random group, and then you finish the key. If you leave, you get deserter, just like in PvP, so you can't queue for 30 minutes or whatever. And maybe that would be a better solution than to completely remove the scoring system or whatever. I know I'm going a little bit off topic, I'm sorry. TLDR, I think this is good. I think it's a good change to have this implemented into WoW, especially because now Blizzard can control the rating. If this is completely replacing the Radar.io score, which of course we won't know yet, maybe people are still going to look at Radar.io instead of the in-game system. But if this actually is going to be an actual contender for the main scoring system that people are going to be looking at, then Blizzard can really play around with this system and be like they could be saying, for example, maybe you get a little bit more score if you do a high key in tyrannical, because right now the highest keys people are doing are in fortified, and that creates an issue that some people don't even want to play on tyrannical weeks at all, because they feel like, I'm just going to play the highest keys in fortified, so what's the point of playing in tyrannical? So maybe with this in-game system, Blizzard actually has a way of influencing the scoring system, manipulate it in a way so people actually play more in like bad weeks. And they can also change the scoring system to have the amount of keys count more, for example, right? Because a lot of people are saying that the Radar.io system, like if you get boosted to high rating, then you get invited faster or whatever. But you can like manipulate the system to say that if you only played one really high key and the rest of them are lower, then your score is lower or something. It could be like an average, of the highest keys that you've been doing, or, there's like a lot of things that Blizzard can do to change the system to maybe to be like a better indicator of someone's experience or someone's skill. They could even add something where you can judge a player's like social like behavior. Like if someone, for example, leaves a key, or someone is incredibly toxic or whatever, then you could give them maybe a bad rating, and maybe that actually reflects in their like social ranking or whatever it may be. Of course that can also be abused. But I'm just saying that these are possibilities. I'm not saying that these are things they should be doing. I'm saying it's possible. Whenever Blizzard has control over these things and it's not a third-party system, then Blizzard can at least change it up. So yeah, I think those are like my thoughts about all of the things that we have seen so far. Sorry that the video got a little bit longer after all. I try to be as quick as I can. I hope this helped you out with understanding the initial changes. Again, I want to repeat myself one more time before we stop this video. This is the initial 9.1 PTR, which means all of this stuff is still subject to change. You can go on the PTR yourself. Everyone has access. You can log on, create a character, test this stuff out, see if this is something you like, maybe you don't like it. Don't be too negative about the changes, even if they have been nerfs. Make sure you objectively think about the changes. If there actually has been something that is really bad for your class, like for example the Stellar Drift change, then you can of course give constructive criticism and then complain about it. Just make sure you're being constructive, because in the end, just yelling and complaining about every change without any like proper way of expressing yourself is in the end not really going to help anyone, and it's just going to spread this like negativity all over the place, which in the end is really not helping anyone, right? So thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked this video. I hope you liked all of the TLDR of the changes. I know this took longer, but I hope I went into as much detail as you guys know. Again, I'm going to be posting all of these links in the description below, so you can go and check them out for yourself if you want to see anything more in detail. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, to get notified. That's the word. Make sure you click the bell to get notified whenever I'm posting a new video. And yeah, remember to also check out my stream once in a while. I stream at twitch.tv/Naguura. You can join me over there for some M+ content and some other content. And thank you so much for watching. Thanks for all the support. I love you guys. Have a nice rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!